Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're opening the vault on a conflict, but one fought entirely without bullets. No trenches, no artillery.
And yet the casualties were measured in national wealth and, maybe more importantly, in shattered confidence.
We're diving deep into the French franc crisis of 1924 to 1926, a financial panic so intense the press actually called it the Franc War.
Yeah.
And here's the paradox we're going to wrestle with, and it's one that I think is so relevant to your own life. How can a major currency just spiral into collapse when, factually, the budget is getting better and the central bank's vaults are literally packed with gold?
That paradox is really the whole story, because it forces you to rethink what money even is.
Right.
It's not just metal, it's not just paper. Money is collective credibility. It's printed trust.
Okay.
So our mission today is to explore what happens when the keeper of that trust, the central bank, starts, engaging in these little deceptions, and how quickly fear can just dismantle an entire economy, even one that looks sound on the outside.
It's a fascinating case study. I mean, the sources always point out France is known for its divisions, right? The famous quote about hundreds of different kinds of cheese.
Exactly. Everyone has their own loyalty. But this crisis shows how a shared anxiety, a shared fear, it just becomes this universal solvent.
It welds people together.
It does, but in the worst way.
Mm-hmm.
It makes them all run for the exit at the same time. The thing that actually holds an economy together is credibility. This wasn't a resource problem at its core. It was a credibility breakdown.
Okay, so let's get into the anatomy of the deception. Where does this all start?
Well, you have to go back to the wake of World War I. France is facing this monumental reconstruction task. Huge financial pressure.
And so the government ends up relying on, what, short-term debt? Things like treasury bills?
Exactly. Things they had to constantly renew. They were, as one source put it, literally living on the breath of others.
Wow.
Just constantly borrowing, hoping the market would roll over the debt next week, next month. And that creates this profound vulnerability.
And this strain, this is what leads to what we're calling the original sin of the crisis.
It is. The government needed cash. The central bank was the easy source, but there were strict legal limits. They weren't just allowed to print money for the state.
So how did they get around that?
They engineered an elaborate accounting trick.
Okay.
The central bank would advance money to the government, but they couldn't just write it down as a loan. That would be illegal. So they hid it. They used creative bookkeeping to conceal the debt's existence.
So what did they call it on the ledger? I mean, how do you hide a loan that big?
They buried it under euphemisms, things like short-term commercial transactions or technical adjustments, basically anything to make it look like it wasn't just cash for government spending.
So they were breaking the spirit of the law and then hiding the evidence in plain sight.
Precisely. And here's the key. They all told themselves it was a temporary measure, just to get through this difficult period. But once you introduce that kind of dishonesty into a system,
Temporary becomes a habit.
it becomes a very dangerous habit.
And the scale of this fake balance, it grew, right?
It did. It swelled to nearly 2 billion francs.
Which sounds huge.
It is huge. But
Yeah.
in context, and get this, it was only about 5% of the total cash circulating in France at the time.
Only 5%. That's what's so incredible. A 5% crack in the foundation was enough to shake the entire structure.
The lie was small in proportion, but it was massive in its impact on perception.
Which brings us back to that essential question. Can a fake number, that 2 billion franc lie, can it actually destroy a real economy with factories and farms and real people, or is it just the trust that collapses?
It's the trust. It wasn't the material hole in the balance sheet that sank the ship. It was the psychological panic when people found out.
Right, because if they're lying about 5%.
Then you immediately assume the other 95% is probably a lie too.
So a lie that big has to come out eventually. What blew the lid off?
The government just hit a wall. They needed more. And to keep going, they were finally forced to go to Parliament and ask them to legally raise the currency ceiling.
To basically legitimize the advances they had already made illegally.
Exactly. And that was the moment of exposure.
And the press must have had a field day.
Oh, it's a political earthquake. Massive scandal, vicious headlines, and a constant stream of votes of no confidence.
Yeah.
And that political chaos is exactly when the Francs just began this uncontrolled slide.
And this is the part of the crisis that always gets me. The sources all confirm that a lot of France's underlying numbers were actually improving.
They were. Reconstruction was happening. They weren't printing money like Weimar Germany, but the market just ignored it.
It completely ignored the balance sheet.
It did. The market stopped trading on data and started trading on the mood of the nation. And the mood was pure anxiety. You had investors just saying, I don't care if the deficit is down, the leaders are dishonest, and I am getting out.
So the fear was so intense that people started making comparisons to Germany's hyperinflation, even though the situations were totally different.
Emotionally, it makes sense. When you see your savings evaporating daily, the recent trauma of what happened next door just comes roaring back.
And that fear became a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Completely.
And all that political instability, the rapid turnover of ministers, they called it a ballet of ministries, that must have just been catastrophic for investor confidence.
Absolutely catastrophic. I mean, think about it from an investor's point of view. If the government changes every few weeks, who's going to be there tomorrow to honor today's promise?
Right. Who do you trust?
That collapse of legitimacy is what triggers the massive capital flight. People just stopped analyzing and started running.
And the press used these crazy wartime metaphors like the war of the franc and the Verdun of the currency.
Yeah, it was an attempt to frame this confusing financial problem as a battlefield, something that could be won with solidarity. But finance isn't a battle of armies. It's a battle of shared psychology.
Which leads us to the biggest, most tragic paradox of this whole story, the gold.
The gold. The Banque de France was sitting on over $1 billion worth of gold reserves, an immense, verifiable store of wealth.
The ultimate life raft.
It was the perfect life raft to stabilize the currency in a panic.
But they wouldn't use it.
They refused. The gold was treated like a sacred object, a family heirloom.
Just something to look at behind glass.
Exactly. They were terrified that if they used the gold to buy back francs, they would lose the symbol of wealth, even if it saved the nation.
So the symbolism was more important than survival.
The lesson there is just so profound. Strength isn't about having the gold. It's about having the courage to deploy it at the critical moment.
And that paralysis, that just fueled the public panic even more.
It did. The chaos, the scandal, the bank's inaction, it convinced everyone the currency was doomed.
And so they sold, preemptively.
They dumped their francs, bought anything else.
Which of course caused the currency to actually drop. The rumor became reality.
And the fall fueled even greater rumors. It was just this vicious cycle. People weren't just afraid of their own losses. They were terrified of being the last one out the door.
The fear of being betrayed by the crowd.
Which makes you join the crowd, even if you know it's a panic.
So after 2 years of this chaos, how did they stop the bleeding? What was the turning point?
The turning point was purely psychological. It centered on one man, Raymond Poincaré.
Okay.
He was invited to form a new government. He was known for his stability, his discipline, his resolve.
And what happened when he took office?
His mere appearance.
Yeah.
Just his name, which signaled to the nation, finally someone is holding the steering wheel. It caused the franc to immediately and strongly rebound.
Wait, before any new policies, before any new taxes were passed.
Before a single new regulation was written, before a single franc was spent. It was just a testament to the idea that in a panic, a single injection of credible leadership is heavier than all the gold in the vault.
Wow. Trust stabilized the currency faster than gold could.
That's it.
That's an incredible story. But what's also fascinating is how society coped with this anxiety by, finding people to blame.
Oh, that's the classic pattern. The public needs a tangible enemy rather than confronting the fact that their own panic was a huge part of the problem.
So they invented these myths like the 200 families and the wall of money.
Right, these shadowy financiers who were supposedly pulling the strings. It gave people a target for their anger. It's much easier to fight a wall of money than to confront your own fear.
So if we boil this whole franc war down, what were the 3 real battles being fought?
I think it really comes down to 3 fronts, and they are lessons that apply to everything, not just finance.
Okay.
First, it was a battle of truth versus story. The facts, the budget, the resources were improving. But the story everyone was telling was they're dishonest, they're powerless, and the market acted on the story, not the facts.
Money is just a collective story we agree on.
And its value is based on the credibility of that story. The second battle was trust versus fear. Fear is the disease. It takes a small hole in confidence, that 5% lie, and turns it into this catastrophic rip that nothing can patch.
And the third?
Power versus legitimacy. You can have all the material power in the world gold industry, but if your political leadership is volatile, if it's up today, gone tomorrow, you lose the ability to make credible promises.
Yeah.
And that kills trust.
That's a perfect summary. So let's make that shift now. If we think of your own mind as your central bank and your reputation as your currency, Maybe crises in our own lives are just mirrors for these same dynamics.
That's a great way to frame it.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
we can draw some really powerful personal lessons from this. I think we have 4 for you.
Okay.
The first lesson, beware the beautiful ledger. Don't just live by presenting a perfect face to the world when the internal substance is weak.
Right. That central bank started with a small technical adjustment, a small lie to avoid embarrassment.
And we do the same thing. The small lie to avoid shame, delaying a task to avoid stress. But if you repeat that temporary avoidance, it becomes your character. And eventually that hidden imbalance comes out.
Lesson 2. Trust precedes material collapse. This is a big one.
It is. A crisis of trust always comes before a material crisis. People lose careers, they lose relationships, not because they suddenly become incompetent, but because other people stop daring to bet on them.
When your credibility is gone, all the skills in the world can't save you.
Exactly. Lesson 3. Use the gold.
Don't just hoard it.
Right. Real power lies with those who dare to use their resources, their knowledge, their network, their skills, when they're truly needed. If your gold just sits in a glass case because you're afraid to risk it, you're still poor when the crisis hits.
You have to know the difference between a symbol and a survival tool.
That's it. And finally, lesson 4. Be the anchor.
The Poincaré effect.
The Poincaré effect. Crowds can destroy a currency, but one person can restore hope. When you become a person of principle, discipline, and credible words, you become an anchor for everyone around you. People crave certainty and chaos. They will gravitate to the one who embodies it.
So the ultimate takeaway from the Franc War is what?
It's that money, like reputation, doesn't die from a lack of resources. It dies from a lack of trust. And that trust isn't destroyed in one big crash. It's eroded by the slow accumulation of all the small, daily, fake balances that we let ourselves get away with.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you. If you want a stable society, maybe you first have to commit to being a stable person. You have to speak truthfully, act authentically, take responsibility, keep your word, because ultimately the decisions you make every day, that is the monetary policy of your soul.
If this deep dive made you think about your own internal economy, share this knowledge. Because the wisdom from the Franc War, it's meant to be spread, to reduce panic and to make sure we stop betraying each other.